Okay, welcome. Welcome to Stillness in Chaos. Gopal, I thought we should
Hi,
start.
Daniel.
Hi, we should start with some music.
Oh,
Just
absolutely. That's why. There's a guitar in the background.
there's a yeah. Maybe I should
There's
play
already
something.
music in the room.
Yeah, lots of music. Maybe we were just talking about what music you like. So maybe I should play something for you since you've had a very long day. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't listen. I can't hear you. You got to do something.
Ah, this is a Beatles
Yes,
song.
much.
Okay, since you've had a busy day. It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night.
I
I
agree to
should
the first part.
think like a love. So when I get them to you, I find the things that you do. You know I feel alright. You know I work all day to get the money to buy you things. And it's worth just to hear you say, you're gonna give me everything. So when I get them to you, I find the things that you do. You know I feel alright. Welcome.
Well, actually, that's such a great song, right? It just goes to the heart of what we are going to talk about. I can tell you this that that's exactly how I've tried very hard not to live my life, which
Say
is not
more.
the work hard bit, but the
Ah,
part where work gets you the money to find the things that make you happy as opposed to the work making you happy.
good. Let's talk about that. We have lots to drill down into. So, for those who are watching, welcome. Welcome to Stillness in Chaos. I'm Daniel. I truly believe that all of us are wise, creative, joyful human beings. And sometimes, emotional distress, grief, a mental health issue kind of clouds who we are as human beings. So my life's purpose is to kind of get myself and people to see who we are as real human beings and kind of unleash that potential. And when I say potential, I mean kind of wisdom, love, and joy. So stillness and chaos is one of the ways that I'm looking to do this. I have incredible people like Gopal. Every 2 weeks, we talk about kind of the intersection of well-being and inner leadership and how each of them is so important to make a difference. We learn from the insights, from the journeys, and it's a way to kind of say that mental health well-being is really important for all of us, whoever you are. So Gopal, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. For those who are watching this, you
You're
can
welcome.
put up your comments and questions, whether it's on LinkedIn or on YouTube, and we can put it up here. Um, Gopal, so maybe a quick intro, and then we'll dive in. So you're a incredible private equity investor, co-founder of Gaja Capital. Started 20 years ago. You've invested millions of dollars. I don't know how much, but into incredible entrepreneurs who are building world-class Indian brands across financial services, consumer products, education. I know there are a few more categories now. Um, and kind of you're super passionate about the India growth story and what India has to offer to the world. I think secondly, I've met a few of the entrepreneurs you've invested in, and the common thread is all of them are supremely passionate about India. They want to build a brand. They're also really thoughtful and wise, and it really struck me when I met them. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper into that after some time. But for me, I think what really stands out is you're a beautiful human being, right? You're gentle, you're
Well,
humble.
thank you for saying that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Not if
you are.
everybody agrees, but yeah.
Maybe not, but for me, that's how you come across. So I can only share my truth. But and you're really thoughtful, right, about whoever it is that you're interacting with. I think I have always felt seen in your presence. And I know a lot of people feel that. And I think as a leader, human being, that's a beautiful quality to have. So thank you. Thank you for being you. And welcome again.
Pleasure being on this forum with you, Daniel. We've had such wonderful experiences together. We have a strong connect. And I'm
Yes.
so happy to be doing this with you.
Thank you. So this is how comments can show up. Suresh says, it's always been a learning path. Thank you, Suresh, for joining. So people, please put in your comments, questions here. So Gopal, you're obviously a complex, interesting, layered human being. And I'd just love to start by asking you, who or what has shaped you? Right? Lots of different things, but maybe one or two really important ones that have shaped you to be the person you are today.
Well, obviously that has to start with my parents. I won the ovarian lottery. I was born to incredibly smart, incredibly educated parents. In India, the smartest thing any person can do is to choose your parents wisely. And I chose them wisely. I grew up in a household full of books and conversations. I've never met anybody who owns more books than my father. And my mother was an avid stock market investor. And one of the first things, and she instilled so many habits in us, and habits are important, right? Because as someone said, habits have a habit of becoming your destiny, right? So my parents shaped me. The second most important thing a child in India can do is to choose his zip code wisely. I chose mine. I grew up in Bombay and Delhi, and that is such a privilege, right? To have grown up and to have such phenomenal opportunities come relatively easily to me. In hindsight, you think about things differently. You think you worked hard, but then as you get older, you look at life differently. That so many things that came to us are so much more difficult for others to access, and we had those opportunities simply because I was born to the right parents and I lived in the right zip code.
What else? What about if I had to ask you about your parents, if I had to go back? What about your mother still stays with you, since you talked about, her, or your father, whatever?
I'm one of those people who have refused to grow up in life. So I have lived literally my entire life with my mother. I still live with my mother.
Really? Oh, I didn't know
Yes.
that.
Right. So my mother is part of our household. Every day I see her every day. Not every day, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And we have our conversations every day. My wife, my two daughters, my mom, and with my mom, invariably I have my arguments as well. And our conversations are about politics. For my mom, the world's problems are her problems, right? And this is now my constant refrain with her: that listen, why do you bother so much about the world's problems? But it was exactly this attitude which shaped me, that she would bring the entire world into our household. That this perspective, that this global perspective, that even something that is happening right halfway across the world is important to you. So that is something that I think I attribute to my mom.
Love it.
And then books, like I said, I mean, our home is surrounded by books. I have friends who, of course, have a lot to do with that. But also, I grew up in a household full of books. So,
And share perhaps how you got into the private equity space. Maybe a couple of initial, experiences, whether great or challenging. Yeah, that come to mind.
yes, private equity is a kind of investing, right? I mean, I got into investing because I love investing. I started investing early. I mentioned it's because of my parents, how they shaped me. My mother was a housemaker, but she was an avid stock market investor. And then there was so much to read. There were annual reports of companies coming in newspapers. I went to IIT to become an entrepreneur, and those were different times. Not many people went to IITs in those times to become an entrepreneur. I married my hobby, my passion with what I learned at IIT and became an entrepreneur on campus. So initially started with investing in public markets. And then I discovered that there was an entrepreneur in me, and that brought me into private equity. I made my first private equity investment now nearly 30 years ago. I invested in Television 18. It was a small company making television
Oh,
software,
wow. Mm.
and I invested in them and helped them become a television channel. It seems like a long time ago, almost a different life. And made some other investments. It seems such a long time ago, but many of those companies have become very large, massive businesses. And that helped me transition from public market investing to private market investing. I just found it more creative, more aligned with my thinking, my character, my desire to be not just an investor but an entrepreneur, an investor entrepreneur, entrepreneur investor. And for the last 25 or 26 years, I've only done private investing.
And maybe you can connect this back to the time when you started investing, especially in India, right? I know, like, yeah, I mean, anything that you want to share, just from that moment you started investing in India, what were some of the challenges you saw, and how did it kind of, how did it help you come to your purpose in a way?
I started investing in an India which was very different from today's India. It was an India of scarcity, capital scarcity, goods scarcity. My first investment was in a cement company, and it seemed like a good idea because there was a scarcity of cement. Simple,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, it sounds like I did something really smart, but that's all I did. Sounds so simple in hindsight. And today's India is very different. I didn't initially start with a clear sense of personal purpose. You can lead an active life, a successful life, but I think discovering purpose was something that happened along the journey. I think there's a difference between being good and doing good. There's a difference between being good and doing good. Most human beings are good, but it's a difference between being good and doing good. And in a way, that's related to a sense of purpose. My sort of consciousness around purpose emerged around, I would say, 20 years ago, 21 years ago. It was around the time that I was conceptualizing, making some decisions. It helped me conceive Gaja Capital. And it helped me clarify so many things in my life. And since then, I think a conscious sense of purpose has certainly guided my pursuit over the last 20 years. But I lived a long life before that without necessarily a conscious sense of purpose. And most human beings, most of us do that, right?
Yeah. And say more about the purpose. If you had to articulate it, what is it?
Purpose is a sense of concentric circles. Of course, your purpose is about you, your own self, about your family, taking care of them, protecting them. For some purposes beyond family, it's about society. But I think my sense of purpose has a lot to do with nation, with India. That's how I grew up. I grew up believing India was the greatest nation on the planet, right? And with a deep sense, and I sometimes I'm really, I get angry with my parents as to why were you saying all these things that India was the greatest nation or is the greatest nation, and where is this coming from? This sometimes clouds objectivity. But coming back to my purpose, in my mind, it's very clear that it's about making a very deep, very wide, and very powerful impact on my nation, and a desire to leave it better than I found it. India has become a better country in the years that I've lived. I may have contributed only the slightest very bit towards it, but I do believe that my work and what I do in my life and how I live it helps India become a better nation, a better country, a better society. And that keeps me going. That's my North Star.
Mm. And that's kind of why you do what you do, isn't it?
Yes.
Say more about India, right? Because it's obviously had a massive influence on you, your worldview, the kind of way you show up. If you were to just think back about, currently what is India's influence on your life and your worldview?
My work is, you asked me a question, what has shaped me? India has shaped me, and my entire work, my life is about India. We built a global business, but the focal point of that is India, India's entrepreneurs, India's consumers, India's potential, India's dreams, desires, fulfilled, unfulfilled. And India means so much to me, and it's at the center of what I do. It's at the center of what Gaja Capital does, which brings us to the discussion that we were having, which is that, life is in many parts, but it's so important if you want to lead a life that seems meaningful, is that every component of your life is aligned with purpose. Otherwise, you cannot but think that you have a disjointed life. The modern human spends an inordinate amount of time working, and and it's so important for that work to be aligned to one's sense of purpose.
Keep going.
What would you like me to say?
I guess what's coming up is what you talked about, right? In the beginning, you talked about how before you found your purpose, you had a long life, and you kind of were doing what you were doing, and you probably didn't think about it. It didn't come up to your consciousness. And I feel a lot of us do that as well. And sometimes even saying, what is your purpose? How do you find your purpose? It's such a paralyzing question to many of us, right? And I think what you said about in the beginning is talked about, I spend a lot of time, making money to be happy. I think relates a lot, at least that's how you were thinking. I know how you're thinking now, and it really helps. But I think that relates to kind of today's theme, right? Which is, how do you look at life as a marathon and not a sprint? So I'm just curious say a little bit more about the purpose, how it's related to the marathon that you're thinking of and not a sprint.
Well, now that you bring the marathon to it, marathon is about time and distance, right? As opposed to a sprint. So the question is really, how do you spend the time pursuing something? And I think the only way you can spend a long time pursuing something is if you have a purpose which is large and a purpose which takes a long time to achieve. So you got to set your goals appropriately. You got to set your purpose appropriately. For example, if my purpose is my own self, those things are easily met, right? A little more effort and your purpose with respect to your family is met. But so I'm not talking of creating lofty goals. It's not about creating lofty goals. This is about creating a direction. So having a distant enough North Star is important, to running a marathon. And why should you run a marathon? Is because compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. It's about more time, more distance. You cover more time. You cover more distance in more time, and you actually cover a lot more in life. Unlike in a real marathon, you cover a significantly more amount of distance with time, because it's very difficult for human beings to imagine the power of compounding, right? It's one of those out of body experiences. It's not a very linear thing to imagine that how different, that what does compounding achieve in life. But I've experienced it, right? And therefore running a marathon is important. But what makes you run a marathon is a clear North Star, a sense of purpose that keeps you going. So these are all things that kind of build onto each other, right?
Yeah, yeah. And even I remember you talking about a 40-year timeline, right? I just wanted you to go back to that moment and share a little bit about that, because I think at that moment, I remember when you were talking about it, it had a massive impact on me, because I was in a space where I was thinking, what do I do with my life? I have these dreams, this ambition, this big thing to make a deep impact on society, and I was feeling a little constrained by where I was, and I think that statement from you really helped me. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that, and also give context with Gaja Capital about the 40-year
Yes,
program.
you're referring specifically to the time when we conceived Gaja Capital, and we said, listen, how do we conceive this, and how do we ascribe a purpose to Gaja Capital, which helps us think not in terms of a of 10 years ahead, but 40 years ahead, right? And Gaja Capital is a distinct entity from me. It needs to have its own sense of purpose, and it has its own purpose, right? I have my own sense of purpose, and it has its own sense of purpose. Good for me that both are aligned. This helps me come from home to work every day. This helps me put in the long hours for the long days and the number of days that I put in, because when I'm at work, I feel whatever I do is aligned with my sense of purpose. And Gaja's own purpose is to be meaningful, impactful in India's context, right? To help India be a happier place, a wealthier place, right? In the way that we pursue it. And of course, to create a large, valuable platform business over 40 years. So I think that's the point you talked about. And why 40? Because, I haven't seen, there are only exceptions to this rule, but those exceptions are far and few, that nothing truly meaningful or impactful, whether it is in the sphere of business, in the sphere of politics, religion, any part of human life, that has been created without a lifelong pursuit. And for an organization, 40 years is a long time. Yeah. Very few organizations survive more than 40 years. 40 years is equivalent to that of 100 years for human beings. Very fewer organizations survive 100 years than human beings. So it was like a lifetime. So how do we think a lifetime for an organization is 40 years? How do we think 40 years? And if we do this well, who knows? Beyond the 40 years, somebody will think another 40. That will be exceptional. And similarly, so purpose is what helps you think in terms of 40 years for an organization. Purpose is what helps you think in terms of dedicating a lifetime to the pursuit of something for yourself. And nothing ever comes out, nothing meaningful. Rarely has something meaningful been created unless and until an organization dedicates its lifetime to achieving it, or an individual dedicates his or her lifetime to achieving it, right? Whether it's home, parents dedicate their life to their children. You can make it simple, you can make it complex. In politics, people dedicate their life to get somewhere. Look at our freedom struggle. It was not about taking out a few years, it was about dedicating your entire life to a pursuit where the results were uncertain.
Yeah.
Hopefully for some, the results came within their lifetime, but they were all prepared to dedicate their entire life for the pursuit of a goal.
Yeah. And that pursuit, whether it's whatever purpose you have, and has a kind of a shade side, right? It has also an impact on the challenging side of it, whether it's your own mental health, whether it's your family, whether it's your confidence, whatever it is. So I'm curious about um, just what have you seen that has been difficult? It's been 20 years now, which is massive, like you said, in terms of in terms of length of an organization. What have you seen that has been perhaps a little difficult sometimes to get over? If you don't mind sharing a couple of challenges, perhaps.
The challenge in life is managing the gap between aspirations and achievement, right? And to stay motivated, no, by reminding yourself that the gap between your aspirations and achievement is 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 a dream. It's not necessarily a lie, right? So that is the challenge, right? Because uh, uh, we will be lucky if we meet our aspirations, but it's a process.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, there is a gap. And how do we manage this gap? And how do we stay motivated? And how do we remind ourselves that uh, the second is sometimes what you achieved becomes a demotivating factor. So how do you remind yourself that what you achieved is insignificant? And I think that's where purpose plays a role, because it provides you perspective. So when you think about challenge, I think that's what comes to my mind. That is challenge.
What you talked about, what you need to think about what motivates you in that challenging time. What motivates you, like literally what motivates you?
What motivates me
Yeah, to keep going.
to keep going? I think it's very important to build mechanisms. It's very important to build institutional mechanisms. Sometimes you can find motivation within you, and sometimes you have to find motivation from sources outside you. So, for example, at work, I think very important is to build the right team, right? And to build coping mechanisms. So sometimes the team draws from your energy, and sometimes you draw from your team. Right? It's very important to set up, for example, a set of, I would say, guiding beacons in your life. People who you believe have seen more, achieved more than you have, right? So there are times when you can find motivation within you, and there are times when you have to find motivation outside, and you have to prepare for this in advance.
Yeah.
If you find motivation within you, you're lucky. But there are moments when you have to find motivation, and this happens all the time. And for that, like I said, you have to build these mechanisms. You have to build, uh, in terms of a team, in terms of your ecosystem, as to what surrounds you, so that you can stay motivated, keep going. On one hand, not be satisfied with what you've achieved, and on the other hand, not be discouraged by what you still have to achieve. The enormity of your goals and purpose.
I just want to come to that because the team is supremely important for all these things you talked about, and for any entrepreneur, anyone who's starting an organization, who's watching this, I think it'd be really interesting to also learn about what you had to put in place, even to think about this 40-year vision, right? Because it can't only be yours when you're starting an organization. So I'm just curious about your team and some of the processes, perhaps, as you thought about this long-term vision.
It's, how should I say this? I think first of all, you put together a team. I was already an active professional. I already had relationships, and I think at that point of time, what was important for me was, how do we walk the next 20 years together? So alignment again of purpose, of values, of culture, being complementary. Not adding more of the same, but having diversity in the team. People who think differently than you, then people who know more than you, and people who have to learn from you. So above you and below you. This is how I thought about the team. So as you think about the core team, how do we find people with congruence of purpose, culture, values, etc., who complement each other? Then, how do we create mechanisms where we learn through the process of teaching and we learn through the process of learning? So constantly bringing in people inside, having people above us. And then these scale up. And if these scale up properly, this is how an organization can keep going.
I want to come back to the theme of the conversation, right? And I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about these when we spoke last, we talked about the different phases of life, and where you are currently. Um, so if I had to just go back really personally to yourself, um, like what has triggered this thinking? I know you probably had it in the past as well, but like right now, how are you thinking about life as this, as a marathon, and not just from a work point of view?
Well, I'm super excited about life ahead. How am I thinking about it is that, you know, um, like I said, the two parts, if you just keep it simple, the two parts of life, which is work and home. And for me, fortunately, both of these blend together. At work, I'm dazzled by the opportunity in front of us. I feel like Gaja is a 20-year-old startup. And it feels like an opportunity of a lifetime. Everything that we've done will be dwarfed by what we will do in the next 20 years. Everything that India has achieved in the last 5,000 years will be dwarfed by what it achieves in the next 25 years. And at home, it's wonderful to see my children growing up. It's wonderful to see, to grow. Now I'm growing older we are growing older along with our parents, to live my life with my wife. How each one of them have their own goals, helping them move on, move to the next step in life. We are born as takers, then we have to become givers. That transition has to be a conscious transition. And I'm enjoying that transition at home. Um, so I'm at that point in life where at home it's the potential and it's the life of my children that is ahead of me, and at work it is the massive potential for India and the potential for Gaja Capital that's ahead of me.
Say more about that. When you say I'm excited by the potential of India in the next 25 years, it's going to be, bigger than the last 5,000 years. Like, what really excites you? What really excites you? I'm just curious.
I think what really excites me is the profound impact the next 25 years will have on the life of our people. Right? There's going to be there's a real groundswell here, uh, which will deeply change the lives that so many of us live. Right? India is a large country. It's become wealthier than what it was, but it's still, on a per capita basis, a relatively not so wealthy country. The next 25 years, this will change. Last 30 years, we moved from 300 billion to 3.5 trillion. It's a big number. But now the journey of the per capita will start, which is the quality of life, wealth on per capita terms. How large, big we are as a nation has been important and will continue to be important. But next 25 years, we will see a significant impact on per capita indicators, both in quantitative and qualitative terms.
What else? Other than per capita and the largeness of
There's only a way of expressing the change. This impact will be profound. This impact will also be about India's place in the world. The role India plays doesn't play a very large role in the world. We have a role to play. We have a responsibility and a role to play. Uh, we talk about our ancient past. We talk about our heritage. And with size comes responsibility. With power comes responsibility. And we have a role to play commensurate with that responsibility. And that is what the new India will also see. A bigger role, a bigger responsibility. How we play it will be novel for people of our generation, for India. And of course, it'll come naturally to the new India that has been born. I'm conscious of the fact that at my age, 5 out of 6 Indians are younger than me, right? So when we talk about our experiences, they're going to be so different than the experiences of the new and the young India.
Yeah. Say more about, because you worked a lot with your entrepreneurs. Are you seeing a shift in the way entrepreneurs are thinking, whether it's again, from an economic point of view, social, whatever the, what's exciting to you about the entrepreneurs, in general?
Yeah, there's a fundamental shift in how Indians are thinking about entrepreneurship. The IIT I went to, 80% of my colleagues wanted to go abroad. Maybe 60% managed to. The IIT Delhi of today, 80% want to be entrepreneurs. What a profound shift. I was possibly the only one or two people on the entire campus who was thinking entrepreneurship. You know what? I mean, feels like a different country, doesn't it? Then what are these entrepreneurs thinking? I mean, today's entrepreneurs are thinking of global opportunities. They're thinking of the world right from day one. They have a different attitude. We were sort of the Steppenwolf generation. We saw an India with scarcity. We saw an India that was changing. But we were defensive in our approach. Today's India is far more assertive. I don't want to use the word aggressive, but far more assertive, far more confident, far more capable of playing a role on the global stage.
I mean, you've painted and again, me and a lot of people and you, and I know many of us are very proud and excited, and I feel we finally come as a come together as a nation, and we are standing our ground and our truth and all that stuff. And the other side is, there are a million challenges that we have, right? So I'm just curious, what worries you at this moment about where we are and how it might impact, say, the next 25 years?
Well, human beings are turning impatient. We as a nation are turning impatient. Like I said, I mean, there are, with progress comes inequality. And what you need forbearance to deal with inequality, and forbearance requires patience. The world is changing. Technology is changing human beings. Social media is changing human beings. We're becoming less and less a patient species. So how do we deal with inequality? I think it's going to be a very profound issue for the human race over the next 20, 30, 40 years, right? How do we deal with our emotions? How do we deal with inequality? How do we deal with things we don't like? How do we deal with things we have to wait for? How do we deal with things when they don't turn the way we want them to, right? How do we deal with challenges? How do we deal with aspirations? How do we deal with the gap between our aspirations and achievements? How do we view other people's achievements, their failures, our achievements and failures? We're just rewriting the book on this as a species, completely rewriting the book. And it's still being written, right?
Yeah.
You can look at it in two ways. Well, we will, as a species, evolve, survive, win. But then there are things to worry about.
And how do you maintain and this is something I've been thinking about as well, right? Because I've been working in this mental health space for some time. It's very difficult. We are dealing with a mental health crisis in the world. We're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with inequality. We're dealing with a lot of stuff. How do you personally not allow that to kind of impact your, not sanity, but kind of your calmness or your way of working, or just not impacting you?
So let's come up with a framework for this. You can have a very long discussion on this, but for the sake of simplicity, I would like to say just two things: internal, external, right? External, you need to set up coping mechanisms. You need to set up coping mechanisms to deal with tough, challenging situations where you're both working on the response and the amount of time it takes for you to deal with that challenge. So I'm a big believer in coping mechanisms, right? And internally, I think it's so important to set aside time for yourself, right? I think one of the principal challenges we have is we have so much more to deal with, but in reality, we leave ourselves with so little time to deal with it. And that's because we are preoccupied. So it's very important to make a disciplined, determined approach towards reserving time for yourself, for your thinking, and for yourself, to look after yourself. And looking after yourself doesn't simply mean pampering yourself with food and stuff. It means pampering yourself with thinking, first of all, to be able to think. So that time is very important. This is in very simple terms the approach I have, to what you said, which is the internal framework and the external framework.
Yeah. Yeah, and it kind of lends itself to stillness and chaos. Let me see what's happening. So ITNs are some of those who are driven by their trust and faith, be it the academics. Yeah, great.
It's not just IITians anymore, I
I was
think.
just going to say, yeah.
Yes, they are very, I think Indians are changing, and it's so visible in the kind of entrepreneurs we meet, in what's happening in sports, what's happening in politics, what's happening in popular culture, everywhere. The new Indian is very visible, and just to take from this comment, driven by their trust, driven by their confidence. They just have a different level of confidence.
Yeah, different level of confidence, and also, yeah, I don't add anything to that. Coming to the entrepreneurs, I feel because you work so closely with so many, amazing entrepreneurs across the board. Firstly, the first question I have is literally, what have you learned from them?
Entrepreneurs, what have I learned from entrepreneurs? I mean, every entrepreneur, it's difficult to kind of sum this up in any, but let's try and do that. Is entrepreneurs are the tip of the spear, right? So entrepreneurs are people who have vision. The qualifying criteria for entrepreneurs is vision. What is vision? And vision is to see beyond what the naked eye can see. Vision is the ability to see around the bend. That is vision. Vision is to see things that haven't happened. So this is what you learn from entrepreneurs, which is, how to envision things that haven't happened, how to gain conviction in them, and how to come up with a work plan to achieve your vision.
Yeah.
Right? Successful entrepreneurs teach you these things. Successful entrepreneurs also teach you how to cope with success and failure. That is very important. That's another discussion.
Say more about that, especially the success part, because we hear a lot about the failure part, but I'm curious about the success part.
The ultimate test of character is not adversity, it is prosperity. The ultimate test of success is a little success. There's so many of us who start out, do the hard, our parents teach us how to deal with adversity. So many of us get a decent start in life, but then we don't compound on top of that start, because we lose our way with the little prosperity that we find. And great entrepreneurs, truly successful entrepreneurs, the marathoners, keep going because they learn, or then they learn how to deal with prosperity. Your biggest challenges arrive when you are successful, not when you are unsuccessful. And that is the difference between creating something that is worth 100 million as opposed to creating something that is worth 1 billion. You are successful to some extent at 100 million, but to go all the way to 1 billion, you really have to take care of yourself as a person.
And
how you handle your success, how do you still keep winning, still, and not fall prey to the things that invariably come with a little success. And there's a lot of this subject has been dealt at great length in Indian philosophy, right? The concept of Rakshasa. So Rakshasas were not demons with horns on their heads or anything, right? How each one of us has a Rakshas inside us, right? That Rakshas actually, more often than not, doesn't come out in adversity. That Rakshas usually comes out in prosperity. With prosperity is how we change as human beings. We change in terms of how we deal with other human beings, how we think about life, values, culture, virtue. How we start thinking as if we are godlike, as if the laws of nature do not apply to us. So going back to your question, successful entrepreneurs, we started with vision, we started with conviction, then we went to conviction, we went to work plans around achieving it, then we came to failure or success, because it's not in your hands whether you get failure or success initially. Dealing with failure, dealing with success. So many things I've to learn from entrepreneurs.
Yeah. And again, this is a personal question, so you can take it how you want. But given that you are a private equity investor, you are bound by your returns to your shareholders and your investors. You've got these awesome entrepreneurs who are doing the work, building world-class brands. How do you balance your kind of ambition for them and their expansion with their own maybe well-being or the way they take care of themselves, or is that a conversation you have? How do you deal with that?
You don't have the same relationship with every entrepreneur, but an ideal relationship is where you can get to this level where you can do the things that you just talked about. One of the deepest unfulfilled desires of human beings is to be listened to, right? So in any relationship, very few relationships are listening relationships. The best relationships are listening relationships. So in a truly mutually rewarding listening relationship, you can get to that point, because without the well-being of an entrepreneur, there isn't the well-being of an enterprise. And there is no meeting of our goals, financial or otherwise.
And whether you're an entrepreneur or not, just a regular human being, or just all of us, I think unless you take care of yourself, it's very difficult to show up in the world. So we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, Gopal. So I know we've talked about lots of different things, and hopefully people are relating what we're talking to the kind of the theme of the show. If I come back to, I mean, clearly, India is such a big part of your life and your, the way you show up in the world, right? And I just want to take us currently to where the world is in all its chaos. What is your ambition for, or rather, not what is your ambition? Kind of, what is India's role? Can India play a meaningful role in the chaos of the world today?
India is already playing a meaningful role. India will play an even more meaningful role. In so many ways, we are a unique country because we are perhaps the only civilization that does not deny its past. We have a conscious sense of our past as we think about our future. Most successful, unsuccessful nations, civilizations around the world deny their past, right? You see that all around. And not every aspect of our past is glorious. There are some not so glorious parts of our past as well, and we are dealing with them. And I think that is what if there's something that India has, first of all, there's no reason to be sanctimonious or to be preaching, but I think this is an example that India sets for the entire world, which is its comfort with its past, its belief in its future, its ability to build upon its the glorious aspects of its past, and its willingness to deal with the not so glorious parts of its past as well.
Awesome. And yeah, it's amazing to be part of that ride as well. Last couple of questions. We haven't talked too much about your challenges, which is fine. But I'm just curious if we look back in hindsight to maybe a few different challenges in the way your life has played out. What have you learned about, or what have you learned from your challenges?
And I think we spoke about this earlier, is that, first of all, the first thing that you learn is that uh, you're better off dealing with challenges with a team, right? Secondly, dealing with challenges requires time and effort. See, what keeps you going is your North Star,
Yeah.
right? And the whole idea of challenges is to win. Of course, is to learn, but it's to win, right? Life is about winning. It's about learning, but it's also about winning.
Lovely. Just seeing if there are any. Sometimes I don't get things. Okay. Last two questions. What's your ambition for yourself at this moment, Gopal?
Well, it depends on which hat I'm wearing. I mean, I have a certain ambition for myself as a team member at Gaja Capital, which is largely to do with Gaja's future. As I said, the next 20 years, there's a certain ambition I have for my role as a parent, as a family member. Family is what you're born with, right? That's the first team that you're born with. So that team that I'm a part of, I have a certain ambition. That team has grown, over the years. So I have certain ambitions with respect to that team, and I have certain ambitions for myself. It's about how do I prepare myself to really do justice to the opportunity I see, both on the work front and both on the home front, both the work and the home front. That's on my mind.
I can't wait to see how that ambition plays out in your life. Love to be part of that. Okay, last question. What does stillness and chaos mean to you? When you hear that phrase, what comes up for you? Yeah.
A purposeful life, following your North Star, right? That is stillness and chaos, at a person, and the ability to be in control of how you feel. So important for human beings to remind themselves that they are completely in control of how they can be completely in control of how they feel.
Yeah.
And if you just subscribe to this paradigm, then you have such a deep anchor in life to to run with life, to work towards your purpose.
Yeah.
To be to give yourself the control you need on how you feel.
Yeah.
That is stillness and chaos.
Lovely. I think the word anchor is coming up very strongly across the entire conversation we've had today. And for you, it's the purpose. It's something that kind of holds you instead in all the chaos of the world. So thank you so much for your time, your wisdom.
Thank you.
Just sharing, being put on the spot with lots of different questions which I hadn't shared with you, but hopefully this was a good use of your time. Gopal, thank you so much. We will be hosting a good friend called Steve Leventhal, who works a lot with young people and their well-being in a couple of weeks. I'd love to invite all of you who are watching to that conversation. But thank you, and good night.
Great, lovely, wonderful talking to you, Daniel, as always. Bye.
Bye.